What's up, everybody? Wes Goldberg here from Locked On Heat with a little pregame type of bonus episode for you today. David Ramil and I will be back later on this afternoon with a full-length episode for Locked On Heat. Still coming to you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, with the latest Miami Heat news, rumors, offseason, speculation, analysis, everything that you're going to want. Plus, with the NBA draft coming up in 2 weeks, we have all of the draft analysis that you need. What are the Heat going to do with the 15th pick and the 43rd pick? Check out our videos, our Blue Notebook series, scouting a bunch of the prospects that the Heat might be interested in. We're going to have a lot more information for you on who the Heat are specifically targeting later in the week. So stick with it here. Make sure you are subscribed on YouTube. Like the video on YouTube. Also make sure you're subscribed on your podcast app. But let's jump into what I want to talk about today. And that is a mailbag question that we got last week, and I think I was maybe too dismissive of it out of pocket. And I had been thinking about it all weekend, and this was the question, and I'm showing it here up on the YouTube page, but Fast Break Freud wrote in, we all know that Zach LaVine's stock has dropped, but what are your thoughts on the Heat pursuing LaVine and Caruso in a package deal? Do you think the Bulls are willing to throw Caruso in a deal to just get off the LaVine contract? And again, I think I was way too dismissive of this off the jump, because I just kept thinking about it all weekend, and I'm like, you know what? LaVine, is he almost underrated now? And then with Alex Caruso making an all-defensive team this year, having him at the point of attack would be awesome. And we explored this a little bit on the mailbag episode last Friday, and I did say, like, a guy like Alex Caruso does make a lot of sense for what the Heat need. You put him at the point of attack, funneling things to Bam Adebayo in the middle. I think the Heat, as good as they were defensively last year, they have room for improvement, right? I thought their defense was good enough to win games, but I didn't think their defense won them games. To me, their defense kept them in games. And so I do think that it's scalable. I think that there's another level for the Heat's defense to get to where it could be a Minnesota defense or an Orlando defense, these top elite defenses that are actively winning those teams' games as opposed to just keeping them in the games, if that makes any sense. So adding Alex Caruso obviously would be a huge get for the Heat. It would give them two defensive team members in their starting five. Plus, when Jimmy Butler is engaged, can easily scale up to that level. And then if they're able to bring back a guy like Haywood Highsmith, obviously another guy who's an elite perimeter defender. So I like the addition of Caruso. But to me, again, my initial reaction was, as much as I like Caruso, can you find another way to go get him? Because to me, getting Zach LaVine isn't worth it. That's not for me, the price of getting Caruso. It's just a little too expensive with LaVine. And this is where I want to start. And a lot of people were in the comments saying, you're crazy. Zach LaVine's not better than Tyler Hero. You're nuts. And I did say, I think Tyler Hero might be better than Zach LaVine. And I stand by that. I don't think that it's just a foregone conclusion that Zach LaVine is miles and miles better than Tyler Hero. Especially given that LaVine, 29 years old, Tyler Hero is 24 years old. When I said that Tyler Hero has a higher ceiling, I mean going forward, right? You can come at me and say, Zach LaVine's a two-time All-Star. All right, cool. That was 3-4 years ago. Like, what is he now? Because that's who you're trading for. You're trading for a 29-year-old Zach LaVine coming off a season when he only played 25 games. Who is he now? That's what I care about. I don't care about what he used to be, right? It's the same thing that the Heat are talking about with Jimmy Butler. It's, okay, yeah, one of the best players we've ever had. What's he going to give us this year and 3 years from now? And that's what we got to think about in terms of giving him a contract. And I think if you're acquiring a guy like Zach LaVine, and by the way, if he was this awesome player that was like a no-brainer all-star guy, the Bulls wouldn't be able to not be trading him. Like, the Bulls would have found a trade for him by now, right? Like, that would have been done. But they couldn't pay anybody to get rid of him at the trade deadline. And now you're getting reporting from NBC Sports' Casey Johnson, who does great reporting on the Chicago Bulls beat in Chicago, saying that they might just salary dump this guy, that they might actually be willing to put stuff into a deal. Like, whatever they were asking for at the trade deadline, they're going to come down in a major way. And so, again, if LaVine was this no-brainer, bona fide all-star, they wouldn't have to be doing that. There were real concerns about his injury history, his lack of defensive ability, or effort, I should say, and more than anything, it's the contract. LaVine has 3 years, $138 million left on his contract. And what I said on the Friday mailbag pod was that Tyler Hero, even if we all agree that LaVine is better than Tyler Hero, and I think LaVine is probably, when they're both healthy, LaVine probably is better than Tyler Hero. But is he $45 million more over the next 3 years better than Tyler Hero? Zach LaVine, 3 years, $138 million left on his contract at 29 years old. He's going to be getting paid $40+ million 3 years from now. Tyler Hero doesn't make anything close to that. 3 years, $93 million. At 24 years old, he's going to be right in his prime, 27 years old, when he's making $33 million a year. So still be about, he's going to be in his prime, while Zach LaVine's probably coming out of it. LaVine will be making $10 million more than Hero will in 3 years, when he's in his prime. So when I say Tyler Hero has a higher ceiling, that's me basically saying, and I might have been able to phrase this better, in 3 years, I think Tyler Hero will be better than Zach LaVine will be in 3 years. So that's just something I think if you're the Heat, you need to consider, because where they are against that second tax apron, their payroll is one of the highest in the league. Right now, I think they have viewed Tyler Hero over the last couple of years as a core member, but they weren't paying him like a core member, right? As much as he's making $20, $25 million, $29 million now, it's a lot of money, but it's not franchise player money, right? Franchise player money is $35, $40, $45, $50 million. What guys like Bam and Jimmy Butler are making, that's franchise player money. If you get Zach LaVine, you are paying him franchise player money. And do you think that the trio of Zach LaVine, Jimmy Butler, and Bam Adebayo is worth paying those three guys, all of them, $40 million plus each per year for the next 3 years? And in Jimmy Butler's case, maybe upwards of almost $60 million 3 years from now. That's sort of the thing that I keep going back to. That said, I do think I was so fixated on the money part that I was a little bit too dismissive, I think, about the fit part. Okay, so when it comes to fit, I was diving into some of the numbers this weekend, and there's some things that really jump off the page to me. So, first of all, in terms of the games played thing, I do there's definitely injury concerns with Zach LaVine. Over the last 5 years, he's averaging 57.4 games played per season. Tyler Hero in that time, 56.8 games played over his first 5 seasons. That's why I did the 5 season, because that's how long Tyler Hero has been in the NBA, since 2019. So basically playing the same amount of games per year. So again, you could say, well, then chalk it up as a draw. Yeah, but then again, you're paying Zach LaVine a lot more money per game than you're paying Tyler Hero per game. And so that's just something you have to think about. It's just not, hey, 57-ish games per year from both of these guys. No, it matters how much you're paying them per game. That's the sort of thing that you got to think about if you're trying to invest in what you're considering a star player, if you're paying Zach LaVine that kind of money. So you've got that. But again, if you're trading one guy and this is all, by the way, assuming that you would trade Tyler Hero in a trade, and I think you would. The deal, I'll tell you what the overall deal would look like in a second, but getting LaVine for Hero, at least you could argue that the games played, the availability thing is probably a wash, right? So then you keep going forward. I do think that Tyler Hero is the better three-point shooter of the two. The stats bear that out, especially over the last 3 years. But LaVine's still an awesome three-point shooter. He's had a couple of years shooting above 40% from three. That has come down over the last couple of years. Again, maybe injuries play a part of that last year. He's still an elite three-point shooter. I think Tyler Hero is one of the top 5 three-point shooters in the NBA when he wants to be. The biggest problem with Tyler Hero is that he doesn't lean into that part of his game as much as he probably ought to. And so you look at their mid-range shots, Tyler Hero taking a lot. We know what he does. He dances into those long twos a little bit too much, too often, and more than the Heat coach staff would want. That's why you always hear the Heat coaches talk about, hey, we want him to be a bit more of a catch-and-shoot three-point guy. Can he drift beyond the three-point line more than dribbling into long twos? And there have been signs of Tyler Hero being able to do that, and I do think eventually he'll settle into that kind of role. But for now, over the last couple of years, he's danced into those mid-range twos way too often. LaVine, for the most part, he does take the mid-range shot. He's capable of taking it, but does not lean on it nearly as much as a guy like Tyler Hero does. My favorite part about Zach LaVine is, for his career, he's taking 30% of his shots within 3 feet of the basket. Tyler Hero takes 12% of his shots within 3 feet of the basket. This Heat team desperately needs guys who can get to the rim. And Zach LaVine can do that. And that's the part that I think I overlooked in my answer on Friday's mailbag was I got fixated on the contract and the fact that they're both basically a wash in terms of games played and three-point shooting. But what LaVine is able to do in terms of not settling for those mid-range shots and getting to the basket, not just with the dunks, right? And we know that he can dunk and all these things. But again, at 29 years old, you don't want to rely on him to always be this high-flying, above-the-rim dunking athlete. But he could still do it. And more importantly, he's got that first step and he's got the size at 6'5", 6'6", with this great leaping ability to just get to the basket. And he's willing to do the work to get to the basket. And so and that is to me the most dramatic difference between Zach LaVine and Tyler Hero, other than the contract obviously, is 30% of Zach LaVine's shots have been within 3 feet of the basket, and 12% of Tyler Hero's shots have been within 3 feet of the basket over their careers. You even go the last couple of years, that number is dropping for Tyler Hero. That number is dropping for him, not going up. Last year, he took 8.6% of his shots within 3 feet of the basket. That's not good enough. And I think part of the reason is, first of all, Tyler Hero never had a great finishing rate under the rim. And because of that, he's developed a nice little float game and things like that. And that's a good weapon for him. But the float game is one thing. To me, you still want baskets you still want shots at the basket. And Tyler Hero compensates for the fact that he doesn't have that athleticism, does not have that height, does not have that strength, does not have that ability to get to the rim consistently by developing that float shot. And that's good for him to do because of his inherent limitations. But Zach LaVine does not have those athletic limitations that Tyler Hero has. So he's able to get to the rim more. It has dropped a little bit for Zach LaVine as he's dealt with some injuries over the last few years, but it's still consistently over a quarter of his shots at the basket versus less than 10% of Tyler Hero's shots at the basket. So it's still a huge difference, even when you consider that Zach LaVine's prime years of dunking everything are probably behind him. Like I said, fewer mid-range shots for Zach LaVine versus Tyler Hero takes way too many mid-range shots. And that's the part that I want to get to here, too, is when you're talking about maximizing this championship window, because Zach LaVine doesn't dance around and do the mid-range shot thing, because he's still an elite three-point shooter, an elite off-the-catch shooter, and can get to the rim more consistently, he's a better fit right now with Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo than Tyler Hero is. And we've talked about that a lot, how Tyler Hero, as good as he might be, isn't a great fit next to Jimmy or next to Bam because Jimmy Butler wants those mid-range shots, right? We know exactly what to do. Slow, methodical, post-ups, get those mid-range looks. That's where he wants to play. Bam Adebayo, that free throw line jumper, that's his bread and butter. That's the shot that he wants to get to most often. Tyler Hero wants to dance around, do the dribble stuff, wants to get into that mid-range shot, find his rhythm that way. You can't have that many guys relying on mid-range shots as their primary scoring option. And I remember talking to Duncan Robinson on this podcast, and even he said, look, I could do the mid-range shot thing. I've got that in my bag. But we've got Jimmy, and I'm paraphrasing here, we got Jimmy, Bam, and Tyler, whose shot diet is primarily mid-range shots. And to be an efficient offense, I need to shoot a bunch of threes, and I need to get to the rim, which is a big reason why you saw Duncan Robinson improve his rim rate this past year. And it was really smart by him. I think if you were to swap out Tyler Hero for Zach LaVine, you would still get some of that, right? You would get a juiced up version of Duncan Robinson who wants to get to the basket, but is going to shoot a lot of threes and provide some size on the perimeter. So as well as Duncan Robinson fits with that starting lineup, right? I think everybody agrees in a vacuum Tyler Hero is a better player than Duncan Robinson with a higher ceiling than Duncan Robinson. But there's also no doubt that there's a better fit in the starting five when it's Duncan Robinson in place for Tyler Hero. We even heard Udonis Haslem say that on First Take a month ago, that the starting five just fits better, it plays better together when it's Duncan in there instead of Tyler alongside with Jimmy and Bam. So if you want the talent plus the fit stuff, that would look a lot like Zach LaVine. So I do think if you were the Heat and you were trying to maximize the championship window, there's an argument to be made about getting Zach LaVine. And then again, you add on the part where, and we're also getting Alex Caruso. If you were able to swing a trade for both of them. And so I teased it before. Here's to me what the trade would look like. This is what would work under the salary cap rules and even save the Heat a little bit of money. And it would be Tyler Hero plus Duncan Robinson and then plus Thomas Bryant if he were to opt in. And if he doesn't opt in, you can basically swap out his contract with Josh Richardson if he were to opt in, or Orlando Robinson. In other words, just one of those smaller contracts. But you would need one of those little smaller contracts to get the deal done for salary matching purposes. So it would be Tyler Hero plus Duncan Robinson plus one of those small contracts. We're going to call it Thomas Bryant, who I actually kind of like for Chicago a little bit, for Zach LaVine and Alex Caruso. And that would give the Heat a starting five of Alex Caruso, Zach LaVine, Jimmy Butler, I'm assuming Nikola Jovic, and then Bam Adebayo. Plus whatever else, obviously, they do in the draft, in free agency. You could still flesh out the rest of the roster. The problem is it doesn't help your payroll issues at all. And I do think that if the Heat wanted to dramatically relieve their payroll pressures, there is a way that you could salary dump either Tyler Hero or Duncan Robinson or Terry Rozier to another team with cap space like Detroit, for instance, or one of these teams, and take very little salary back, if any salary back, and just relieve all that cap pressure that you're facing right now. If you were to trade those two big salaries for Zach LaVine and Alex Caruso, finding a way to relieve that cap pressure and then re-sign somebody like Haywood Highsmith and or Caleb Martin becomes really difficult, right? Because now you're definitely jumping back into that second tax apron and all the multipliers and everything. It becomes a really expensive team. Maybe that's something that the Heat would be willing to do. Maybe not bring back both Caleb and Haywood, but maybe bring back one of them so that one of those guys can come off the bench and give you a little bit more defensive oomph. If you think that this team could be good enough to maximize this window right now, maybe Mickey Arison says, you know what, let's go into the second tax apron for a year and then see what happens. Again, long term, if you're Andy Ellisberg and you're crunching these numbers, you're like, whoa. Well, now we're going to... So if you do the LaVine trade, I do think it's obviously then you're going to say, you know what, Jimmy... Let's just sign you the max extension. We'll give you that third year for $56.5 million. We'll go for, or whatever it is, $60 million, and we'll go from there. But it does become the core of the roster. Not just this year, but a year from now, and then 3 years from now, where Jimmy Butler is going to be going into his age. He'll be 37, 38 years old. Bam will be fine, still in his prime. He'll probably have signed a new extension by then. And then Zach LaVine at 32 years old. Can he put the injury issues behind him? I guess we will see. But paying him a lot of money that year. And if you're the Heat, that's just something that you have to be aware of. And that's sort of the calculus that you have to do in your head is 3 years from now, this could be really, really painful for us. But do we think that we can maximize this championship window now and maybe over the next 2 years where, you know what, we gave ourselves a really good chance this year and next year. And even if it looks bad 3 years from now, we're willing to live with it when all these guys are on expiring contracts and we're just a really expensive team and maybe it's just a gap year for us. But we're willing to live with that gap year 3 years from now in order to maximize a window for a year or 2 years in the immediate term. So, again, I don't... Like, the salary still really scares me. The salary number here scares me because you're also got to think about the opportunity cost here. Is Zach LaVine the best thing that's going to come around over the next 2 years? Is it the best thing that's going to come around this summer? Right? I don't think that Zach LaVine would be at the top of Miami's wish list. You know, we're still talking about Donovan Mitchell. We'll see what happens with the Atlanta guys. Does anybody else shake loose? What's going on across the league? But again, I think I was too dismissive offhand to just completely dismiss it as an option altogether. I think it needs to be an option. It needs to at least be something that the Heat are thinking about on the board somewhere at Kaseya Center. His name should be written down. It's not a no-brainer for me. It would be a really hard thing to pull the trigger on, but I don't think that there's any doubt that doing a deal like that. Also, we haven't even talked about the Chicago side of it. Would they even want Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson for Zach LaVine and Alex Caruso? Would the Heat have to throw in the 15th pick in the draft? Would they have to do something like that? That's a whole other part of the negotiation. But on paper, just the idea of Zach LaVine, I think, plus Alex Caruso, has a lot more merit than I probably gave it credit for when we did the show on Friday. So that'll wrap up my little bonus segment thing here that we just did. Again, hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Thanks so much for the support all offseason long. Locked On Heat, Monday to Friday. We're going to have another episode for you later today on Monday afternoon when David and I have a chance to connect. And then we'll have another one coming to you on Tuesday morning. But for now, thanks for listening. Have a great day.